into everything else, and it's actually going pretty good. At this point, we've kind of got it down, but
after these years.
Yeah. Yeah. So you are a family friend of David.
That's right. Yeah.
Shire?
That's the one. Yeah. So he's a childhood best friend of my brother.
Cool.
Yeah, and I've got sort of a complicated family, but essentially I got to meet David eventually, and we got chatting. He said that he was in games, and so yeah, I just thought I'd ask him if he knew anyone that could be of help to me, and he put me to you.
Yeah. And it sounded like from our exchanges that you're a young writer who's you're still in school, is that right? Or
yeah, so it's my last year of university, so I finish in a month.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
And so what we have to do, I'm on a filmmaking course, but I want to be a screenwriter. That's kind of all I've ever wanted to do, and we have to compile a report into. Essentially, the module is designed so that we have to go and do research onto how we want to enter. How we want to start our careers.
Okay.
And some people are looking into things like streaming. Some people are looking into things like what YouTube, the opportunities YouTube provides. And I've always been interested in games, so I thought I'd do that.
Yeah. Okay, I gotcha. So the assignment is sort of geared to like, hey, as a professional, how do you break in? How do you get your start?
That's sort of that's how I'm going to answer the brief, but it's more about an analysis, because we've been doing artistic analysis for so long that they want us to kind of have a look at more of the business side, the black and white side of creative industry.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If you have questions for your report, go ahead and shoot. Otherwise I can tell you what I think. Yeah.
So I'll just let you know what we'll go through, and if you have any objections, just let me know. Sure. So I'm just going to start off with how you got into the industry, and then how you go about what your kind of process is, how you see the current landscape essentially for writing video games, what you see the industry is like at all, how it's developing with things like VR and mobile games. I've got a couple of questions there's a question about IP. I'm quite curious to understand how writers go about that. About a sort of, I've always been curious about how the process goes for pitching IP. So,
gotcha.
If whether it's a writer. So, for example, if you watched a film from years ago and you thought, wow, this would be a great game, whether or not the process works that you would take that to a company, or whether or not a company would say, this would make a great IP, let's ask a writer to prepare a pitch for it.
Sure.
Okay. And then there's a couple of things about just sort of how you see a knowledge of coding, how important you see a knowledge of coding and design being.
Mm-hmm.
So whether or not it's an easy transition for a screenwriter, or whether you do need to have quite a strong knowledge base in design and code.
Sure. Yeah, those are good questions. All right, let me start with how I got to the. So how I got in, growing up, I'm like in my mid-40s, and I was playing games in the 80s,
mm-hmm.
And there wasn't much in the way of consoles quite yet. We had the arcades, and we also had the early games for your PC.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really gravitated towards the ones with stories. So we had text adventures from companies like Infocom. We had graphics, Sierra. I think it was, her last name is Roberts. I feel terrible not remembering her first name. But it was a woman, co-owner of Sierra, Roberts, who just figured out how to attach art to the text adventures. And all of a sudden now we had adventure games, with art and story. And I was really taken by them. And then another company that did some great work in that space in the early days was LucasArts. So
right.
George Lucas. It was LucasArts, and before they were really making Star Wars games, they were making games like Monkey Island and Full Throttle and Maniac Mansion and Day of the Tentacle. These really beautiful, well done, they call adventure games. Stories, graphics, and inventories, puzzles. And playing those, I was like, oh my gosh, Monkey Island especially because it was funny, and I always liked, gravitated towards stuff that was funny. Now,
yeah, am I right?
Am
I right in thinking you did Leisure Suit Larry?
I worked on a Leisure Suit Larry game.
Right.
Yeah, and I actually freelanced. I don't know how popular it is in the UK, but I freelanced for The Onion, that website.
Yes, I did see that as well. Yeah, I love The Onion.
Yeah. And I gravitate towards comedic stuff. A lot of the games I've worked on and other things have been comedic, and so I've been playing Monkey Island. I'm like, man, someone had to come up with these jokes, and someone had to come up with this story, and I just kind of knew, like, even in high school, like, I will never ever be a programmer of note. I'll never be an artist, but maybe I can be this person who comes up with the stories and these jokes and figures out, like, what the puzzles are supposed to be. I had no idea what that person was called. I'd never heard the phrase game designer, right? And I don't think game writer even existed as a profession at all.
Right. We were given a talk yesterday. A narrative designer from Splash Damage came in. The guys that did Gears of War.
What was his name?
It was Khan. She's a woman.
Okay.
And she was saying that quite often you'll find. She said, being a narrative designer is a new industry or a new career path, even for new career paths. Even in the scope of career paths that have recently arisen, it's new even for those.
Yeah.
And she said, what will happen is a company will hire a narrative designer and then realise that they've needed 6 for however long.
Yeah. That's a really keen observation. It's funny. Right. So I'll kind of support that with my own anecdotal evidence here. But so that's high school. So Flash. So unfortunately, back in like the 80s and the 90s, there was no clear career path. Say like, oh, you'll just go to the school and get a major in game design, and then you'll go. It just doesn't really. That didn't exist. It exists a little more now. Like you can go to like University of Southern California has an amazing program for games. There are places like the Vancouver Film School, I think it's called, in Vancouver, British Columbia. There are schools now where, especially as an artist, like if you can go and learn how to make things out of 3D and make a beautiful reel. But there's even schools you can go to learn game design. A lot of universities in the States, at least, and I'm sure this is true, in the UK, the computer science department will get real involved in games, maybe have a game programming sort of track. But none of that really existed at all. So I had no idea how to get into it. I took some, my life took some twists and turns where I wasn't really focused on, I wasn't moving towards this goal. But in my late 20s, I kind of had it figured out. I knew I wanted to be a game designer. I knew I wanted to have a creative role in that space. Again, I knew I wasn't going to be a programmer artist. I kind of figured out how to position myself. I was living in Chicago, Illinois at the time, and they don't have a huge game development scene, but they did have some studios, and I was able to break into a studio as like an assistant producer.
Right,
and,
okay.
Then transitioned to the game design department from there, where as a game designer, I learned the ropes. Did everything. So we did all the art and programming. We did all the sound and audio, music, and studio for that, and we even had a motion capture studio. pretty early in the game for that kind of thing. We had one, and we had a game designer, and so you had a game designer, and then as was very common, when all of a sudden the studio, if we're going story's really important, or at least the dialogue.
Could you? Sorry, you broke up a bit there. Could you say that again?
I was going to say, so as a game designer at Highwood Software outside of Chicago, and as is very common, when a studio is working on a game where the story was real important, or at least dialogue was really important, and that falls to the game design department. And so that kind of fell into my lap, and I had a little success with it. Leisure to Larry, and then when I was laid off from Highwood in 2006, it took me a little while. So getting back to this you were making earlier, in 2006, I was laid off from Highwood Software. My title had been game designer, though I had been on writing, especially for Leisure to Larry. I didn't even have a plan to take a living as a full-time freelance game writer because I didn't think that was something that was good. And indeed, when I looked around, and we went to small industry, you're about 2 degrees of separation every. If you don't know them, you know somebody who knows them. And we all go to the developers conference in San Francisco and all that. So when I looked around, the number of freelance game writers I could count on two hands.
Right.
And but just 2006, need for regular games is mushroom.
Yes.
And there are dozens and dozens of freelance game writers out there working.
Right.
And many studios have full-time game writers, and as you say, even sometimes, small departments of just game writers.
Yeah.
And I'll piggyback on that to sort of, you had another question about, I think, what do you think the future of writing is in the game industry? Was that?
Yeah. So just sort of one of my observations for this report is going to be kind of, it's going to look at the career opportunities for screenwriters in game development, but I realised that what's becoming more popular is the kind of storyless mobile game. Things like Flappy Bird and things like that, where you're just tapping and there's not necessarily a story that needs to be fleshed out and designed by. There'll always be that kind of stuff, right? Here's what I have noticed personally, and this is based here's what I think based on my observations and some theory, right? People say that the game development, we're in sort of that infant stage, but oftentimes people will say where we are now is kind of where the movie industry was when they were making their silent films. Do you know what's really crazy is what's really and kind of heartwarming for me as well is that I've been telling a lot of people that lately. I don't speak to many people that are interested in game development, but one of the things I've been talking a lot about lately is the fact that what you're starting to see is a small kind of community of game criticism is arising. In the same way that in the early kind of 30s or maybe even 20s, a kind of school of people that started to realise that films were pieces of art, and they started to criticise them as if they were, and that's starting to arise in games. We're starting to get game studies and YouTube channels that are criticising games and people writing about them in an artistic way, not just a kind of good or bad way.
They certainly can be, right? So if you're looking at the industry now, there's certainly different categories of games. We have what we call, we call them indie games now, but there are games for which the story is hugely important, and in some cases it's the only thing or it's the main thing that's showcased. Gone Home, they're right here in Port where I live. Full Right Studios made Gone Home. Campo Santo, which next Telltale made.
Sorry, could you say that again? Sorry,
Firewatcher.
you broke up as you started talking
Firewatch.
about these games. Sorry.
So we have a category of developers where we have a category of games for which we tend to refer to them as sort of indie games. There's with the story hugely important, right? And then some instances the main thing.
Yeah.
Firewatch by Santo, Gone Home by the Four, Studios. We it's just like it's like watching one.
Sorry, you completely broke up there. After Gone Home, you completely broke up. I'm sorry.
Okay, let me see here. Let me try and move to a different spot. Give me a second.
No worries.
Is this better?
Yeah, that sounds it.
Okay, good. So, right now what the industry is, we have games for which the story is extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
And in some games, it's really like the main thing. Games like Gone Home by Idle, or by the Fulbright Studios, and Firewatch by Campo Santo, and that kind of thing. We have our big sort of blockbuster-y stuff where you kind of need a story, but no one really cares, like Destiny from Bungie. You know, it's like watching a Michael Bay. You need a story is just kind of a clothesline for big action set pieces,
right?
Crazy stuff. Okay, very valid, very fun, but story-wise, it is what it is. You also have this what they call casual gaming market, which I think most people don't think about when they think video games. But you have an older crowd there, slightly more female than male, and some of those games, huge. The story is very important. The art may not be, state-of-the-art graphics, because older people don't care. So a good example of this is if you go to gamehouse.com, again, that's gamehouse.com.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a client of mine for many years, and you look at the series like Delicious, Emily's, and you can play them either for free. I think you get like an hour for free. Fabulous Angela. The stories are very important. So you have, it's just like the movie industry. You have projects where the writing is extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
And character development, dialogue, it needs to be sharp, and you have stuff where it doesn't matter too much. But what you see overall, across all these different little subcategories, is the bar for story gets raised slowly for everything.
Right.
And here, what I have seen is largely a competition thing. So I've seen this happen a couple times, where when Gamehouse first hired me, and I don't know, it was maybe 10 years ago.
Right. And
they were making these types of casual games, and they were used to just sort of having them made by like a studio in Poland, where the labor was cheap. And it was like they didn't give a shit about the story was written by like a programmer when he had spare time.
Yeah.
And the English was just very broken, and no one cared, like audiences. But then, so many different companies were in this space, and eventually one of them says, let's spend a little money to get like a writer that speaks English, is a native English speaker, and can do a little better with the story. You know, we have the same graphics and the same gameplay.
Yeah.
Hello?
No, yeah, I'm with you. I'm following. Yeah.
Okay. So let's spend a little money on like getting like a writer. And now all of a sudden they have the same gameplay, the same style of graphics as everybody else, but their story is better, and they're doing better.
Right.
And I've seen this happen, and then it's like their game is a big deal with casual game fans, with women in their 30s and up. And you may not, hardcore gamers may not know this or care, but it's happening. So then everyone else is like, well, we need to stop just putting broken English into our games, or we'll fall behind.
Yeah.
So even the bar are just and gamers get older, and there certainly are backfilled by young people, but now you have this older, more mature audiences that want good storytelling, and the bar overall for everybody slowly gets raised some more, and as evidence, you can look around and again you can see in 10 years I could have counted all the freelance writers on two hands. Now it's we have you could fill a giant conference room, I'm sure, with people who are either game writers or at least maybe they're game designers that do a lot of writing.
Right.
So yeah, we're early in the game industry's early in its lifespan according to people, and the number of game writers has exploded, and I have just personally seen how different companies sort of are now will eventually and this happen. And again, I've seen this happen in multiple places. I've seen this happen with Facebook games. Right? Like, I don't know if you remember, there was a time for a little brief while where everyone was playing their games via Facebook.
Right, like Farmville and things like that.
Yeah, even there, like, those first games just had no story, doesn't matter, who cares.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody comes along and basically makes the same thing, only their story's a little better. And now Zynga's hiring writers, and now Big Fish is hiring writers.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, the story wars erupt wherever there's a new gaming niche or whatever. The bar gets pushed a little higher.
Right.
So then you were talking about what knowledge and experience maybe you should have or could have, game design, programming. So when I started, I was wanting to break into game design. Part of the way I positioned myself after talking to professionals and thinking it through, I realized I needed to have at least some good understanding of object-oriented programming to try to get a game design job. And I took some classes, and I couldn't. Did I lose you there?
No, I'm still with you.
We're good. Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, my phone is like warning me. Okay, so. I couldn't program anything, but I had some basic understanding. That's really good for a game designer, and nowadays I think that's gone even further. If you ask a veteran game designer working in the industry now, like, how do I be a game designer? They'll tell you two things. Number one, make games. I don't care if they're card games. I don't care if it's a board game. It doesn't have to be electronic. It needs to be fun, easily understood. Whatever. Make games. But number two is know how to program. Because a game designer who has no knowledge of what a programmer does for a living, it's rough. It's rough going. Right?
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm concerned about. Is if I was say tomorrow, Kojima calls me up and asks me to go and help him write something, I wouldn't be able to confidently tell a designer, no, this is why we need to do it this way. Well,
okay, so here's the good news. For a game designer, you really need to have some knowledge of programming, and possibly, there are game designers who majored in computer science, or at least minored in it in college.
Right.
I don't think that My phone keeps beeping and warning me of a poor connection. Oh.
I'm good. I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I'm just going to keep talking.
Yeah, I'll let you know if you drop out.
Okay. You don't. If you're just a game writer, you don't need to have this vast knowledge of computer programming. It's not necessary.
So roughly, what would you say? Because that's kind of what the report is centered around. Is how to.
If you're positioning yourself as like, hey, I am a writer. I'm not a game designer per se. I am focused on the narrative and the writing. I think what's much more important is that you understand video games and how they work. I have seen writers from up. Yep. Yeah, so I have seen writers come into games from other genres and really struggle because they're used to, linear forms of writing. They don't understand just how arduous and difficult it can be to write for a game.
Right.
You just need to understand video games, right?
Yeah.
And it's really not necessary as a writer that you have a deep knowledge of computer programming. As a game designer, yes. As a game writer, no. I don't think it's. I'd be surprised actually if most of the game writers I know, if they knew how to program, I'd be surprised.
Right. Okay. Because that's one of the things that I'm kind of looking into is how I would approach a company if I have if all I have to offer is storytelling experience and nothing else. How would I go about that?
Yeah, I mean, for a small studio, that wouldn't be ideal because you have to wear a lot of hats. But I think for a large company who's looking for a junior writer,
you dropped out there. You dropped
that
out.
You have. I think what's more important. Well,
Yeah, go again. You're back.
Okay. So I think what's more important is, if you're trying to get a job as a game writer, that you have in your portfolios, some great writing samples, period. But then also maybe some great writing samples that come from something interactive. So, for example, let me give you an example. Twine. Do you know what Twine is?
I just learned about this yesterday. Yeah.
Okay. So. Free, and you don't need, like, anybody could, you could make your own short game in Twine, right?
Right.
And if you have that to show somebody, that would go to a long way to impressing them.
Right.
As far as wanting to, because it knows that you are interested in interactive writing and that you've taken it upon yourself to create some. And if it's cool and interesting and it's entertaining, whatever, that can go a long way to getting you noticed by a studio that's looking for a writer, a narrative designer, or whatever. So I wouldn't worry about programming for sure.
Okay.
I would worry about playing games, being able maybe to talk intelligently about what makes for some good interactive storytelling, being able to analyze video games that attempt it.
Yeah, so I'm very confident with those kinds of things. Regardless of whether or not I'm right, I do have quite strong opinions about those kinds of things. My worry isn't so much about once I'm in the room, it's getting in the room at all that I'm having difficulty understanding.
Well,
especially considering I've not worked.
If you really want to get a job writing for games, you need to create a website that positions that where you call yourself a narrative designer.
Mm-hmm.
You should probably honestly not tell people like, hey, I've always dreamed of being a screenwriter my whole life. Because what you see a lot of times in games, I'm not saying that this is you, but you see a lot of this in games where people kids come out of school and they're like, all my life I want to make TV and film, it's all I've ever wanted to do. Maybe I'll settle for games.
Oh, that's definitely not the case. Yeah, no.
Oh, right, yes. But you don't want to give that impression by mistake. because
right.
the game industry sees a lot of those people. And the other scenario we see a lot of is somebody who had a career in TV or film, and then it's over, and they're like, maybe I'll slum it in games for a paycheck. And those set up, for a lot of creative directors and things, that can set off some alarm bells. Like,
huge turn-off.
They want people who really love games. Not that, they really want people who love games. So maybe you have a website, but I tell people, you start a website, call yourself a narrative designer. It's free. You don't have to ask anyone to give permission. Make something interactive, and you can start with Twine because it's free. And I think it's free, and it takes some figuring out. The other thing you can do to separate yourself and stand out from the crowd is use some of the tools that are out there by game developers and so let me give you an example. BioWare, if you apply for a job at BioWare, at least they used to do this, they would make you take their tool set. So they have an interactive tool set they created just for their writers, and say, use our tool set here to create a little quest or two that tells a really cool story, and we'll judge it and see if we want to hire you. So these tools are usually, at least they used to be, free. Like you could, with some of the PC games, they used to just ship the tool set, and if you bought the game, like Baldur's Gate or something, you'd have the tool set, and you could sit there and make. So if there's those, so what that tells them is not only hey, are you a good storyteller, but can you actually do the job of the game writer and get your hands dirty with these tools, and create the interactive narrative, similar to Twine. Twine's kind of the same deal.
Yeah.
So now, then you're like, well, how do I get in the room? I mean, of course, it's just a matter of, okay, once you've positioned yourself, you've got a website that really makes you look good, you're a narrative designer, definitely get on LinkedIn. I know, especially young people, a lot of people think LinkedIn's stupid, and young people maybe aren't sure about it. It is by far. I get so many jobs from LinkedIn. I've gotten so many jobs from LinkedIn.
Really?
People in the game, absolutely. People in the game industry move around so much. It's such a great way to keep track of one another.
Right. Hello?
Yes, hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yep, you're back.
Hello?
Hello? I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
I'm here.
Back?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Are we back? Yes.
Okay.
So you positioned yourself. You have samples to show of interactive writing, and possibly some and even non-interactive samples are good. But you have at least some interactive samples, hopefully on your website, so people can easily check them out whenever they want.
Okay.
Then you're just ready. Then you're ready to spam everybody in the industry, starting with the studios you really want to work for, and say, "Hey, I'm a game writer. Do you have any openings? Is there any freelance? Do you need maybe some extra help? I can do a little contract work for you." And you basically you could start by just spamming a company or that but really you should be looking for when they post jobs.
Right. Okay.
So you can go to Gamasutra. It's still where people post a lot of game jobs. I've seen people actually call out on Twitter, "Hey, we need to hire a game writer." LinkedIn again. There's Crystal Dynamics is hiring for a director of story or narrative. I know that because I saw it on LinkedIn.
Right.
Networking, again, the industry's so small, networking is such a big deal. And it is hard to break in when you're new because you don't know anybody. But because the best way really to get a job isn't by spamming or so much or cold calling, but it's because you know a creative director and you can at least stalk them online and find out so that if they do make an announcement that they have an opening for a writer, you're on top of it.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, with David, it's kind of I've always struggled a little bit with nepotism, and it's kind of hard to say to him, "Can you give me a leg up" or something like that.
Right.
Especially when I have nothing substantive to show to him aside from passion.
Right. Well, that's something. Be willing to relocate.
Absolutely, I'm 100% ready for that.
Yeah. Now that would be a little hard because you're in the UK and no one. I mean, I shouldn't say no one, but I doubt you'll find someone who will want to sponsor a visa and move you to the States just for a junior position. But if you're willing to move anywhere in the UK, and I don't know, hopefully if Brexit doesn't happen, maybe you. But the casual game industry, it can be a good. Now here's also another thing you can think about is I mentioned how a lot of games are made for North American or for a North American audience. In other words, America and Canada.
Yeah.
But especially America is by far the biggest audience consumer of video games in the world.
Yeah.
So even when studios in Sweden and Finland and Poland make these great games, they care about how they sell in their home country, but that's a drop in the bucket sales wise.
Right.
They care about America.
I did think it was funny that CD Projekt Red were almost an entirely Polish studio, and they make The Witcher and Cyberpunk.
Yeah, and I would bet you that at least some of their writers are native English speakers.
Sure. Yeah.
Poland. In fact, I know 2 women who are involved with the first Witcher game who are from California.
Right. I mean, because recently CD Projekt had a post up for a junior narrative designer, and I didn't know what to put. To be honest, that's one of the reasons that I decided to take this report on, is because I wouldn't have a clue what they would even find relevant. I mean, I've written, obviously quite a lot, and I've but I wouldn't know.
Things like short stories. I'm not as sure about screenplays, but possibly. But especially I know people who have been hired because a creative director read a short story they wrote and thought it was awesome,
right?
Or saw a lot of potential. I was like, yeah, I'm going to hire this person,
right?
So I wouldn't let it hold you back. If you have samples of any kind to show, you've got a shot.
Right. Okay. So you and I suppose so you think it's better to, for example, I have a play that I'm quite proud of. So it's just a short play, but you think if I sent that, and then it's better to send that and then go, this isn't very appropriate, rather than not send anything.
Well, sure. I mean, if you send nothing, you've got zero chance, right?
Yeah. No. I'm just sort of trying to understand, because obviously even within the industry, they're not going to expect someone to have written for games that are starting every time.
Yeah. I mean, a junior position, they're probably. Yeah. I mean, they may, sometimes they'll say in the posting, but.
Sure.
They're not going to expect that you've shipped a lot of games, or maybe they might not even expect you've shipped anything.
Yeah.
Or maybe they'll say preferred, we prefer you to have shipped 1 or 2 games or something. But it's very possible to get a job in the industry as a junior writer based off of a great short story you wrote or something like that.
Right.
It's happened before.
Yeah.
All right, so positioning, claiming the role. I'm a narrative designer. Positioning yourself. Here's my narrative design website. Here's my interactive samples, as well as my cool short stories and stuff I'm proud of. Put that online so it's easily accessible.
Right.
And then just be relentlessly persistent. And
because another part of this whole sort of report thing is that we have to set our own websites up as professionals.
Yeah.
And I'm struggling with, because like I say, I want to write games, but I just want to tell screen stories. Those are the things that I love. So I'm kind of struggling with what to put, and also I like photography, and I want to show off some of my photography on there too. So
yeah, I think that, here's my opinion, and again, this isn't just my opinion.
Sure.
I'm not the god of game writing by any stretch, but it's what I think studios prefer are creative directors, people who hire game writers. I think what they like to see is focus.
Right.
A lot of people I know as young people, sometimes they come to the industry and be like, well, I'm kind of a cool artist. I like to do concept art, and I want to be a game designer, and I can dabble in programming, so I'd be a perfect fit. And it doesn't really. Most game studios, large studios, are not looking for a jack of all trades type. Mm-hmm. They're looking for somebody who's really like, I'm a programmer and I love physics programming. I'm a programmer and I love artificial intelligence.
Right.
I want to be a game designer, and I want to be I want to be a game designer who works on combat-oriented games, and I just want to focus on combat. Uh-huh. I'm a game designer. And I'm a game designer, but I'm not really a game designer. I'm a narrative designer. I want to work on stories and dialogue and helping to tell the story through the game, mm-hmm. and writing the dialogue and working with the artists and programmers to create this fictional world that we're all building together.
Right.
And they want to see some focus. Now, I do think that they also can, I think, be encouraged that you have, some hobbies. Because sometimes you get these people like, I played every single game since, I was 6 years old. I played every game on every system, and that's all and you just kind of worry that this kid has like Asperger's or something.
Right.
And, and it's just going to be maybe a little too much of a closet case to want to work with.
Right, yeah.
And so, if it were me, knowing what I know, I'd put up my website, my pictures, people could see my face, and I would be like, I'm a narrative designer. Click here to read some samples of my interactive and non-interactive work. And, maybe off to the side, I would put a little page that says, I also love to take pictures. Here's some snaps I'm proud of.
Right.
I would, maybe I wouldn't even mention it. I don't know that you might put a screenplay with your samples if you're proud of it. But, the screenplay thing, and I've written some, I even worked on one film that got made. I don't know a ton about Hollywood or the screenwriting business, uh-huh. But I just don't think maybe it needs to be a part. If your website is essentially a pitch to get you a job as a game writer, I wouldn't bring the screenwriting into it much. I would, because if you do keep writing screenplays, and you should, if you love it, that's great. I imagine when you get that first big, if you end up becoming a pro screenwriter, it won't be because of your website. It'll be because you gave someone a blowjob and did coke with them or something.
Right.
Which is fine. We all play the cards we're dealt in life. Right? So let's see. Process. I think you had some. Was that part of the?
So another of my sort of questions.
Yeah.
For you specifically was I'm not, mostly because it's quite shrouded from the public, but is there a kind of a sort of consensus on how a game comes to fruition, or how it gets greenlit?
Yes and no. Yes and no. There are. When I first started, there weren't a lot in the way of books. How did I get to understand screenplays? I read a lot of screenwriting books.
Right, that's me too.
Now, in 2018, are there some game writing books? Yes. Mm-hmm. Are they good? I don't know. I haven't read any of them.
Right.
But I can tell you that a lot of this knowledge of best practices on how to make a game, or how to implement a story into a game somewhat seamlessly as possible with the gameplay, and how to sort of use the gameplay to help tell the story and the story and vice versa. A lot of that is tribal knowledge that gets passed down, has been sort of passed down,
right,
from person to person, right? Because the game industry is new, and it is, we don't have a lot of formal, or at least traditionally haven't had, there's a lot of film schools out there now. And, films had a 100-year head start,
right,
on games, right? So a lot of this knowledge is tribal knowledge. and what's interesting, so I'll give you an example. When I was at High Voltage Software, and we realized we were going to be making this Leisure Suit Larry game, and it was going to be, a little different, but we realized that it was going to have, the story was going to be kind of important. At least having a funny story was going to be important.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought, hey, let's hire some of these veteran guys who worked at LucasArts and were making the Monkey Islands and those things.
Right.
Okay. And it turned out to be Dave Grossman, and Noah Falstein, two very highly respected, longtime veterans of games that are still working today and still working in very prominent positions in games.
Mm-hmm.
And they, in turn, sort of taught us the quote-unquote LucasArts method of, the same sort of method that they used to create the stories and things for Monkey Island games and other graphic adventure games. And they showed us that. They put us through that process for this Leisure Suit Larry.
Right.
And now I will, as an aside, because it's kind of, be very difficult to get into necessarily over the phone. It would take a long time. But I made some YouTube videos. If you search my name on YouTube, I think you should find them.
Right.
And I made some they're very crude videos, but I actually stepped through the process pretty well, and you can get a pretty decent sense of it, at least by watching the videos. But it was like, they had come up with this process, and it was really this guy named Ron Gilbert, who I think had really pioneered this process. He taught it to people like Dave Grossman, and of course, Noah and Falstein, and they taught it to us. Now, it was really interesting because after I left High Voltage Software and I started freelancing a lot, I realized that I could use this process for a lot of different games. And I used it over again and over again and over again and over again. I like to think I got pretty decent at it.
Right.
Not because I'm a genius, but because I'm just doing it over and over and over again, right? Like the carpenter and the chair.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'll go to studios and I'll have my clients in the room, and we'll go through the process with them, and maybe they learn, maybe they use it themselves elsewhere, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Tribal knowledge. If you watch the videos, you'll see. I mean, it's once you come up with a story that is conducive to your game and the gameplay therein, you pretty much then just create a giant flow chart, working backwards mostly from the end of the game to the beginning.
Right.
And lay the whole thing out in kind of a flow chart. Then the flow chart incorporates, the flow chart helps you just know exactly when, where, and how you're going to further the story. Mm-hmm. And it incorporates not just things like cinemas but also gameplay sequences of different kinds and exactly where they are and what is accomplished and what the player's doing. And then from there you sort of dial it down, and you're able to, once you've got this flow chart settled, you can then sort of dial down and write cinemas. You can then look for the puzzle sequences and decide what the NPC you should say when you run past them trying to solve this puzzle and all that stuff.
Right.
The videos will help illustrate it a little more. But yeah, I mean, so at least for me, there's a process. Obviously, I think other people probably have different processes, different games. Games can be wildly different from one another, right? So
sure.
You go to a studio that's making games for a long time, making similar games for a long time. I'm sure they have their own, maybe they have vastly different processes. But the one that I've talked about in the videos, I think is, somewhat universal, I think. It certainly worked for me on a lot of different types of games.
Right.
And genres.
That's
my opinion on that.
Yeah, I guess the question kind of came from my knowledge of the process of films coming to fruition. It's kind of, you say a writer has their own idea, it's a spec script, and you write a little treatment, and then so you write that over 1 page, and then you might write it over 2 pages, and then 5 pages, and then you start to do your first draft, and obviously that is the entire blueprint for the production.
It's much more collaborative. So you may certainly write. I mean, I start with treatments for sure.
Okay.
But even then, it's like creative director. I'm a freelancer. Like, I serve my clients. They're telling me, okay, this is the type of game we want to make, and this is sort of the idea we have for a story. Okay. A lot of clients will confuse having a general idea for a story with actually having a story, right?
Yes.
You're like, okay, cool, what's the story? Well, he's about a guy who, he has a boomerang for a head, and he, does stuff and rescues somebody. We're like, okay, those are some cool ideas, but you don't actually have a story. You don't have a beginning and a middle and an end.
And you don't have those core ingredients that brew up.
So let's get this into kind of a treatment, and we'll start, maybe with a 1-pager, and then we'll go through it together and get more feedback, and then we'll flesh it out more, and then we'll just get to a point where we feel pretty solid about it, that we can then take it to the flowchart phase, because the flowchart phase is really the most important, where kind of the rubber meets the road. Your treatment is not going to be read by hardly anybody on the team,
right?
Except the creative director and a few other people that care. It's intensely collaborative, and then when you're doing your flow chart, so I worked on Valiant Hearts. This game, we had 6 people in the room, and I'm guiding the process. I'm like a teacher at the whiteboard, and I'm writing this flow chart out, but everyone's helping me decide what happens next.
Yeah.
Right. In the context of this story that we now have in a treatment, what happens next? What happens before this? Okay, then what happens before that? All right, well, what happens before that? Well, what happens before that? Well, pretty soon we're at the beginning of the game, because we're starting at the end, probably. Now, you had talked about, pitching things.
Yeah, yes.
This is interesting. So, this doesn't really happen, ever.
Okay.
It's not at all like the film industry. And in fact, I remember, let me give you an example. I'm sure you never do this, but I was at the Games Developers Conference one year, walking the expo floor, where a lot of game studios will have a booth because there's a lot of hiring that goes on,
So just as a quick aside, would you suggest attending one of these maybe?
I would. I think, though, it can be really hard when you don't know anybody.
Right.
Your Game Developers Conference can be tough when you just don't know anybody.
Okay.
And there's two. I mean, you can either just keep going every year and keep making friends, and then eventually it'll get a lot better. But that's expensive. Or you can try to do. Networking is really important. You can just do all the networking you can. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're in the UK, and you start to meet some people, and those people introduce you to their colleagues, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. Maybe you start getting some gigs. At your stage, I mean, I know people have strong opinions about this, but I think if you're able to get together with some real small indie, another great way, of course, to beef up your portfolio is to just go find some indie game hobbyists and be like, hey, can I do some writing for you, even just for free, just for my portfolio?
Right.
So a couple hobbyists working on a little 8-bit whatever platformer. Mm-hmm. But whatever, do some networking first, and maybe then go, so that when you're there, you have some people you can meet. Maybe you'll get invited a few places, like a party or two. I think showing up when you know nobody at all is tough
and a bit weird.
It's hard, of course, if you're able to luck into it like a student pass or something, you can get a lot of benefit from going to the lectures.
Right.
When you're but I think it's the networking part is tough when you don't know anybody. Now, so there's this particular type of person that always shows up at these conferences, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember what booth it was, but I'm hanging out at this booth of this studio, and I'm about to, I'm giving them my resume and say, hey, I'm a freelance writer, I have a lot of experience. If you ever need somebody, give me a call. And they're usually like, yeah, okay, cool, sure, whatever. Unless they're really seriously looking for a writer, then they may talk to me for 5 minutes. But this kid, right? He's wearing a fedora, and he's like, I got a really cool idea for a video game. You want to hear it? And the guy's like, no, yeah, I thank you, but I really don't. I said, well, why not? You could make it. It's my idea, and then you could make it, and I'll, be, the creative director. As a way, somebody else put it this way. It's kind of a mean way to put it, but it's kind of accurate. No one cares about your ideas.
No, yeah.
Yeah, it is totally true. It's like every studio out there is just busting their ass to make games usually for somebody else, for money, right?
Yeah.
So, Disney might say, hey, we want to make a $6 million, an Iron Man game for $8 million, and all these studios will fight to be the one to make it.
Right.
And really, they're making a $10 million game, but they're doing it for $8 million, right? And that's why everyone's working 100 hours a week. But be that as it may, they'll dream of the day with their own IP. Every owner of a studio or every creative director has their dream game they want to make, has their dream IP that they want to invent, bring to life. And if they ever have a shot to do something original, that's what they want to do. They'll never be like, turn to someone else and be like, well, I don't have any ideas. Hey, you're a 23-year-old kid with a fedora. Why don't you give me, why don't you tell me what to do? Like, no one cares about your ideas, right?
Yeah.
And here's what's really important. You shouldn't give those away anyway.
Right.
You really should hang on to those for the off chance that you get to someday start your own studio, or self-publish your own comic book, or make, you don't want to give away your IPs.
Right.
Your ideas. And ideas are generally considered worthless anyway. They're completely worthless. If you have an idea and $80 million and a really talented team of 100 developers, I'm all ears. I want to hear it.
Yeah.
If you have an idea, that might be worth a beer while I listen to it, and I might buy you a beer so I can listen and talk shop with you. But nobody cares. You'll hardly ever be in a position. Now this can happen. It can happen where like Cartoon Network or somebody might come to your little studio and say, hey guys, I don't know, just give me some weird, wacky ideas, and if I like any of them, I'll fund you. And even then, you're getting into like, okay, well, who owns the IP at that point? If publishers are pretty notorious for being awful, although I think Cartoon Network is better than most. But if they're paying for it, generally they want to own the IP. So at that point, you're just giving them your idea, and they're paying and they're funding it, and which is really cool. But they own it.
Yeah.
So this actually kind of happened to me, where I took this, there was one year where my freelancing really slowed to a crawl. So I took a full-time job with a studio that let me work remotely. And it was awful. But the guy was all about, like, I need you to create IPs so we can put, some simple games, that can be played on tablets. And I came up with this IP that I sort of, had in the back of my mind I thought would be really, really cool. And I did it, I created the characters, and I did all this writing, and I just, I created this whole world, and I was really excited and proud of it. I knew that it wasn't mine anymore.
Right.
In fact, I was fired after a year. This guy, I just did not get along with the owner at all. And I get along with people. I really do.
Yeah, I can tell.
I haven't been freelancing for 15 years by not being able to get along with people.
That's true.
Well, it was 15 years. 12. No, whatever, 14. I don't know. So it's not much. I left the company. The IPs stayed behind. I don't own any part of it. Yeah. And I never will. And that's okay. Like, I knew that. But I'm actually a little bit like, I guess it helped me stay employed for a year. But man, I really wish I kind of had that idea back, that it was still mine.
Right.
Like, maybe I could have really pulled that off on my own at some point. But whatever. You'll never be in a position where I shouldn't say never, but I just, even if you do find yourself in a position where they're like, just tell me your ideas, maybe we'll make a $100 million game out of it. You probably, at that point, you just don't want to, I don't know, unless you can own the IP. I don't know if you want to do that. Does that all make sense? Like, it's just not like the film industry. People don't do pitches. There aren't pitch meetings. There are games based off of blockbuster movie franchises. There are, there are studios like Destiny and BioWare who come up with their own IPs, but that's like, the owners and the company and the heads of the company that are deciding this is what we're going to do. And as a writer, you help them do it, but you're an employee and you're not a stakeholder in the IP. You're just, I don't know. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It was just more about getting a sense of, again, proving that I can write about games, really, so that I know what paperwork is necessary.
I mean, take the pessimist view of no one cares about your ideas at all, ever, unless you have a giant check attached to them.
Got you.
Right? All right.
Yeah.
So, was there anything that we did not cover out of those questions that you need for your report?
No, we covered we covered mobile games, didn't we? And how?
Yeah, I think it's a subcategory of games. There's absolutely lots of games that require no story, but there is some world building. Sometimes as a narrative designer, writer, I realize, over the years, sometimes my clients call me, and what they really don't need a story. They think maybe they think they need a story, but what they really need me to is build a world for them.
Right.
Candy Crush doesn't have any story at all, but there's a world there that that maybe a writer came up with, or maybe they just came up with it as a team. But there's a world there, and Angry Birds is a world. There's another big game called Best Fiends, another big mobile game.
Right.
They actually, I don't think there's any. I think it's very similar type of thing where you're just kind of clicking and it's just. But they actually offered me a small freelance job, and I couldn't do it because I was doing something else.
Right.
But I know, like, if you go play Best Fiends, I can tell you that there was a writer involved somewhere, even if it's just world building,
Right. That's good. And so you worked on Portal Nights, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. You're right. So I still working for those guys. Yeah. That's where I met David and.
Yeah, because that's his, isn't it? Sort of he oversees. Hello? Yeah, I'm still here.
I lost you.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, I just got you back.
If I'm not mistaken, that's his. He works on that on Portal Nights. That's his thing.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. It's a fun game. So yeah.
The last thing was just two more things.
Sure.
One was your thoughts on VR.
I own a VR for my PlayStation. I barely touched it. But I think that's sort of the problem with it. I think the industry is still trying to figure out what's fun about it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I've seen the game industry is quick to embrace, the game industry is quick to embrace things that are new, technology that's new and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And there was a real VR bubble for a short time. And a lot of people that I know personally left their jobs to go work for a VR studio or a game studio that was into VR and AR and all that stuff. Now, a year or two later, and so what? Like, name one killer game for VR that would make you go and buy a VR headset right now. It doesn't exist. Ubisoft even had a quote. They issued a press release to their investors who were like, well, what about VR? I'm like, yeah, what about it? Where's the fun? Now, I think the game industry, I'm optimistic, will find it, right? I think, when you look at the future of games, science fiction, of course, is always this precursor to science. And when we look at Star Trek, The Next Generation, and the holodeck, right?
Right.
That's the future. That's where we're going to be eventually. But obviously, we're still a ways off. We haven't found the fun in VR. The VR games don't sell much in general. They come nowhere near, they maybe sell nowhere near a fraction of what the most popular, like, just non-VR games sell for.
Right.
There are no system, what they call system sellers. There are no games. They're like, oh my god, I got to get a VR headset because I got to play this game. It doesn't exist. For me, I've seen a lot of technology changes, since 2000. Well, I started games in 2001. Okay. Uh-huh. So I've seen a lot of changes in technology. I've seen, the Microsoft Kinect. I've seen Facebook. I've seen the tablet arrive. I've seen the smartphone arrive. I've seen handhelds get amazing and consoles keep improving.
Yeah.
But the real challenge is really, it's not like, oh my god, this changes everything, this technology. As far as story, it's really, my work and my job and my core job have stayed the same.
Yeah.
It certainly helps to, obviously you need to understand the limitations and the advantages of the platform you're working on, a phone versus a tablet versus a PC versus an Xbox with a giant television attached to it. That's obviously important. But what I consider my core job has changed very little throughout. And style of game is important, right? Like I'm going to approach writing for a Facebook game differently than like Pearl Lines. But again, going back to the core things that I do, they really have not changed dramatically with leaps in technology or the introduction of new gadgets like the Kinect,
right?
And things like that,
Yeah. Did you see that they think that Google's new console is going to change everything?
No, I doubt it.
I don't think it will.
It's like Valve is, people keep it out. I mean, maybe, and then we'll adapt. But no, I mean, honestly, who gives a shit, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. Like, it's just playing games. It's just
like what is it gonna do that? Now, I mean, Xbox and Sony and Nintendo maybe won't be necessarily the console kings forever. I mean, that changes too, right? Like Sega came and went, but
that's a good point.
What is the Google Stadia gonna do that's so freaking great? So what? Because the thing is not the technology. Ultimately, the end consumer. If you get a small group of people that are really geek out on technology, but the vast number of consumers just want to play cool shit.
Yeah.
And if every time we introduce new consoles, there is a dogfight to see which one is the alpha console, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's the Sony is the winner. Sometimes Xbox is the winner. Sometimes Nintendo pulls ahead. But what usually what determines who the most popular console is who's got the most coolest exclusive games, right? It's about the content. right? It's about who's got the coolest exclusives. If it's a game I can play on all three, then you whatever. But is Google Stadia going to have some great exclusive games or system sellers that people are going to flock to? We'll see. But I don't know, it just sounds like health insurance, right? Like Google Stadia.
Yeah.
Who cares?
That's great. So the sort of last thing I wanted to ask was, I did a little bit of research on just cursory industry figures, and from 2017 to 2018, I saw an article that said that the video games industry grew from $100 billion to $130 billion, and that they had projected that it was going to grow to $120 billion by 2020. So it outgrossed its own predictions a year early by $10 billion. And just based on that, I just wondered if you felt that if screenwriters have screenwriting ability or screenwriting skills, if you thought that they should try and make inroads in the video game industry as it grows.
Well, should they? I don't know. I guess looking at it as a writer who works almost exclusively at games, there's pluses and minuses, I do think it's easier to get into games. It's not easy, but it's easier.
Right.
There's a lot of work around. It doesn't pay nearly as much as screenwriting. I think, it's much more.
That's more what I'm saying. Is
that's. I can't see movies myself becoming obsolete because of games, right?
Sure, it's more.
I don't know. I could be wrong about that. I have two teenagers, and they like to watch TV sometimes, but I can't get them to go to the movie theater anymore.
Yeah.
I would say it's probably like if you're really looking ahead to the future and you're young and you love both, it's probably a good bet to get in on games.
Yeah.
That's a hard one to answer.
Yeah, I I was more thinking in terms of screenwriting per assignment is obviously the pay ratio is insane, because if you can get a job writing a screenplay, if they commission you or whatever, great. But what I'm more saying is, is there more opportunity because of this growth?
I think so. You've got so many studios around the world. If you're a native English speaker, I think that it gives you an advantage. Because so many people need them because America has such a huge audience, or English speakers comprise so much of the market. I guess if you're just looking at it from sort of a financial, that would be the smart move, right?
Right.
We're getting bigger than the film industry. We'll continue to that trend will continue. Films, it's great that they have a union because they can get paid well, but that actually, that makes it harder. That's part of what makes it harder to get in, besides just the general clickiness of Hollywood, is that, if a field is unionized, you can't just show up and be like, hey, everybody, I'd like to work here. And you can't do that. You can't do that in games. So, I think the answer is yes. I forget what the question is, but...
Okay, well, thank you so much. You've been so helpful. Sorry we've run over.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you... so maybe you can watch the YouTube videos. Maybe they'll be helpful to your report. But if you have follow-up questions and things, just feel free to email. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Let me know how it goes. Let me know when you have a website and samples that people can look at, and I'll keep you in mind if I get busy and I see something. There's a gig where I think that a junior writer could be a good fit. I'll definitely send things your way.
I'd really, you have no idea how much I'd appreciate that. That would be really great. And if you're ever over here working for 505, let me know and I'll get you a beer, all right?
You never know. I've gotten to travel to some fun places for work. It's happened before, so it may happen.
Mark, if they have you over, you got a beer on me, all right?
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you, Ed. I'll speak to you soon, all right?
Yeah, take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.